is a Squeaky Metal Stool production.
The land was thirsty dry. Thirsty dry. There was so little water. The lakes had just enough water in them to cover their bottoms and nothing more. And the rivers, if that's what you call them, the rivers just sat there. They couldn't remember which way to flow, up or down, one way or the other. And as for the fish, it was so dry, the fish knocked on people's doors asking for a cup of water. Welcome to Telling Simple, a storytelling podcast. The story you're about to listen to actually did take place in the past. It's being retold to you in what's called a bare bones storytelling style, meaning the retelling of the story is stripped down. And after you hear the story, you'll understand. At the end, I'll share the truth behind the story just to make up for any stretching of the truth I might be guilty of. And now for the story. It took place around San Diego, California, known for its beaches, its zoo, and its warm climate that once upon a time kept away the rain clouds for a little too long. There was a time, around 100 years ago or so before Christmas. No, wait, it was just after Christmas. That's right. The land was thirsty dry and in need of water. In fact, it was so bad, there was not enough water to go round for the city folk to take baths. Really. And around the outskirts of town, it was so dry, it was said the jackrabbits could be seen carrying water bottles around their necks. And then there were the trees. You could hear the trees whistled for dogs to stop by and pay them a visit. Some trees even bribed dogs with sticks, hoping that some dog would lift up its back leg and give the tree a drink. That's how thirsty dry the land was and in need of water. Now back then, there was this fella who knew a secret. But there was just one little problem with his secret that he could never quite overcome. But that didn't stop him. For a price, he'd show up to a town, and with his secret, he'd do the impossible. With his secret, he'd make it rain. And being that he could make it rain, he went by the name of the Rainmaker. Well, one day, just north of San Diego, right next to an almost empty lake, the Rainmaker and his brother built a tall wooden tower. And up on top of that tower, the Rainmaker and his brother could be seen running all around. Now, nobody knew exactly what the two men were doing up there, so from time to time, somebody would climb up there to the top of the wooden tower to have a look. Well, the Rainmaker and his brother, they just stopped doing whatever it was they were doing, and they chatted with the stranger for a while. On top of the tower, there were water tubs and pans, and there was a fire going with smoke flying up into the air. And the smoke, whatever was in that fire, gave off a terrible stink. And scattered around were bottles filled with different colored liquids. And as soon as the Rainmaker and his brother were all by themselves up on top of that tower again, the two men could be seen running all around again. This went on day and night, day and night. The Rainmaker and his brother ran around the top of that tower, and the smoke from their fire poured up into the sky, day after day, night after night, going on and on. I think it was a little over a week that up in the sky, there were these dark, angry clouds that showed up. It started to rain. Day after day, night after night, It rained and it rained. The Rainmaker and his brother ran around on top of their tower, and the smoke from their fire poured up into the sky, day after day, night after night, going on and on. It rained so much, fish stopped begging at the doors, asking for a cup of water. The city folk, they were washed clean. Jackrabbits ran around without water bottles tied around their necks. And the trees had all the water they needed. In fact, the trees put up little signs that said, "Don't pee on me." It's just too bad dogs can't read. Soon, all the lakes and all the rivers around San Diego swelled higher and higher and higher. The city folk begged the Rainmaker to stop with the rain. So the Rainmaker and his brother stopped. They stopped their running around on top of the wooden tower. They put out the fire and they got rid of that stinking smoke. But the rain just kept falling and falling, and it kept raining, and soon the rainwater rushed over the tops of the dams, and soon the rainwater raced across the land. It washed away houses, it washed away animals, it washed away roads. Oh, and it washed away city folk too. The people splashed around, and sadly some people drowned. But in time, when the rains finally stopped, the Rainmaker showed up in San Diego to collect his payment. You see, the town leaders had hired the Rainmaker to make it rain. And as long as the Rainmaker filled up the lakes and made the rivers flow, the Rainmaker would get paid his money in full. The Rainmaker had thought about asking for extra pay for all the extra water that fell, but the Rainmaker was not a greedy man, no. The Rainmaker only asked for what he was owed. In San Diego and the places around, there were broken houses and missing barns and washed away roads. And there were millions of dollars worth of things that needed fixing. And many animals had died, and far worse, people had died. Somebody needed to go to prison. Somebody needed to pay. The city leaders were in a real bad spot. If the Rainmaker got paid, then fingers would be pointed at the city leaders for hiring the man. It would have been thought their fault. And the Rainmaker? He too was in a bad spot. The Rainmaker and the city leaders only shook hands about the payment. Sure, the Rainmaker filled the lakes and made the rivers flow, but there was nothing in writing to say he'd get paid. Besides, if the Rainmaker did get paid, then fingers would be pointed at him for causing all the damage. And then the Rainmaker would end up having to pay more money than he was owed. In the end, the fault was put not upon the city leaders, nor upon the Rainmaker, no. The blame was put upon God. That's right, God. The heavy rainfall was thought an act of God, and all those homes and barns and roads that were lost, not to mention the animals and the people that died, all of it was said to be the fault of God. And being that you can't put God in prison and you can't make God pay, the city folk took all their energies and went about fixing and cleaning up the land. Really. And as for the Rainmaker, he left town feeling cheated. He never got paid. But he did leave with a lesson. Handshakes were good, but from then on, all deals were written down. Remember at the start of the story when I told you the Rainmaker had one little problem with his secret know-how that he couldn't quite overcome? All people cared about was, could the Rainmaker really make it rain? And the Rainmaker answered always, yes, he could make it rain. He just didn't tell anyone that he didn't know how to make the rain stop. And now for the backstory. Who was this rainmaker? Well, back in the early 1900s, Southern California was hit with a really bad drought. At the end of 1916, the city of San Diego hired a man named Charles the Rainmaker Hatfield to make it rain and fill up all the nearby lakes and reservoirs. Charles had made it rain in other cities along the coast, or at least he took credit for the rain when it did rain. In his lifetime, Charles said that he made it rain over 500 times. Charles claimed to have developed a secret invention that he called the moisture accelerator. You know, a few jokes come to mind, but I'll skip those. In San Diego, when he set up shop, he took credit for all the rain that fell, even the extra rain that flooded the land. But when the rain finally stopped and Charles went to claim his payment, the city of San Diego refused to pay him on the grounds that he was hired to fill the lakes and reservoirs only, and I quote, not the whole darn city. So Charles the Rainmaker Hatfield was never paid, as you heard about in this story. Meteorologists who have studied the weather back then said that Charles only deployed his secret moisture accelerator at times of the year when the rains were already in the forecast. So even though many experts believe Charles was a fraud, it sounds to me that not only was he just really good at predicting the weather, but he was also really good at putting a lot of stinking smoke up into the air. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story, please feel welcome to take a moment to like this video, click the subscribe button, or write a review. You can also find more stories at the Telling Simple podcast, as well as on Instagram and Facebook. And now I'll leave you with this. If you know of anyone who likes a good story, your telling them about this podcast is always greatly appreciated. In order for a story to live on, not only does it need a teller, but it also needs a listener. My name is Eric Hurt, and thank you for joining me.
This is a Squeaky Metal Stool production.